you mentioned everything is about connections. Curious, why do you say so?
Well, because nothing happens without people. There's 369 trillion in global wealth. And, countless ideas and endless information, but 8 billion people. And so it's really important that you establish strategic relationships because nothing happens without people. The first thing, I never liked the word networking. I thought it was icky and manipulative. And so it does require that you build genuine relationships. Or one of the biggest problems is people are lonely. And so one of the best things that you can give to people is a listening, kind ear.
I'm a firm believer that there's always a connection between who we were as a child and who we become as an adult.
And I find out that at our core, we're all the same. One of the things we find out is everybody's got problems. When you're younger, you worry about what everybody else thinks about you. And then when you get, my age or 50 even, you realize nobody was thinking about you. They were always worried about themselves. I've got better at understanding that I have to first take care of myself. You want to make sure that the people that you have in your network fit with your values and they can help you. Not only can they help you, but they can make things happen for you.
Beautiful.
There are people out there with no empathy at all, and they will just use you. I always say give people 3 tries, but the 3rd time they're out.
Judy, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you here on the podcast, The Ex-Monk's Drive. How have you been today?
I'm good. I'm really good. It's a beautiful fall day here in Idaho. Lots of golden leaves falling. So I'm doing great. Thank you.
Beautiful. And how's your health? How is everything going on at the family front?
Everything is going good. So, I feel blessed.
This episode is very important for me because I remember our first conversation, which is almost like a year back. And you planted a seed in me of the importance of having genuine good connections. And I remember our last conversation. In fact, I was sitting in my drawing room. I was just holding my laptop on my lap, and I was having this conversation with you. And you mentioned everything is about connections. I shall repeat that. You mentioned everything is about connections. Curious, why do you say so?
Well, because nothing happens without people. There's no lack of resources on the planet. And as you know, people call me for help to get funded. Many of them believe there's no money out there. There's 369 trillion in global wealth. And, countless ideas and endless information, but 8 billion people. And so it's really important that you establish strategic relationships because nothing happens without people. People know where the jobs are. People are the ones that write the checks for you. Other people are often the ones that tell you about the first jobs that come up. I think they estimate now 90% of jobs are filled by word of mouth. And so, people are absolutely critical. And you as an individual can't know it all. So it requires you to, open yourself up. I know a lot of people have a hard time asking for help, but the majority of people are happy to help if you ask.
Yeah. Very often, Judy, I've come across people who find it quite hesitant to build genuine connections. People have their own fears. What do you think? How can an individual overcome their fear or reservations or hesitation around networking and building genuine connections?
Well, the first thing, I never liked the word networking. I thought it was icky and manipulative. And so it does require that you build genuine relationships. And I was so shy in the corporate world, and I realized I wasn't getting ahead. And it finally occurred to me that I didn't have the network in the corporation. I read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it was a game changer for me. And I just first started saying hello. And then I figured out to ask, I started with dumb things like, how's the weather where you live? Or, but that got me in the habit of being able to talk. And then I made it a game to see if I could talk to anybody in any situation. So I recall vividly once pulling up to a restaurant, and I said to my friend who's in the car, whoever pulls up next, I'm going to figure out a way to talk to him. So these people pull up, and I noticed they have Idaho license plates. And at the time I lived in Utah, and they got out and I said, "Oh, I'm from Idaho too. Where are you from?" And it ended up in a 3 or 4 minute conversation before we all went in the restaurant. And I found out that most people are just delighted to engage. You know, the number one problem, or one of the biggest problems, is people are lonely. And so one of the best things that you can give to people is a listening, kind ear. And so I would say it just takes some practice, and then to think about your assumptions about strangers are dangerous, and that most of them aren't. I mean, we're taught from the time we're kids, strangers are danger. And so it takes a little bit, but for me, it was, I think I felt that I would be rejected. You know, I always didn't feel good about how I looked, and I didn't think I was smart enough. And I thought I would be rejected, and been on panels with Mark Cuban. I've, you know, been to palaces for dinner. And I find out that at our core, we're all the same. We all want to be loved. We all have family friends. Most of us, you know, adore, love our pets. And that if you push past your own discomfort, that you'll come to a place that is easier for you to connect.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm 200% in sync with when you said that strangers could be dangerous. In fact, it reminds me of a conversation that I was having with my niece, and she said once, and she was in ninth standard, she said, "Uncle, don't you think strangers are the friends that you have not met yet?" And for me, that was a game changer. I said, wow, I never looked at strangers from this perspective. Judy, I'm a firm believer that unless we connect, there's a part of us which is left unfulfilled. At the same time, I'm a firm believer that there's always a connection between who we were as a child and who we become as an adult. To give you an example, at one point in time, I could not speak effectively, and I would stutter. What that means is that people would joke every time when I would open my mouth. And today, if I look at my life, speaking helps me to get my bread and butter. At the same time, it helps me to heal the wounds that I had as a child. And today, it's my greatest strength. It's my gift.
Yes, you're just a great communicator. I mean, I remember our first phone call too, and I loved talking to you. And I remember that you were so open, you were vulnerable, you were willing to talk about things at a deep level, not just blah, 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 blah. And I think it does help us to heal. And one of the things we find out is everybody's got problems.
Yeah.
I think when I was younger, I used to think, you know, these people went to Harvard or they're wealthy and so they don't have problems. Everybody has problems. It doesn't matter where you are. I heard once you're either coming out of a problem, getting in a problem, or going through a problem.
Always, always.
But you're right. I think it truly does help us heal. And an example for me was I thought I was shy until I was 28. And I talked to my friends and they laughed at me and they said, you're not shy at all. And it made me really think of what situations I was shy in, and it was kind of large groups. Well, now I've given speeches to 4,000 people. And so speaking is also one of my strengths. But what I did was I turned it to, how can I best help these people? What could I share What could I teach them on their road to success?
That's exactly what my question is. What are those wounds from your past, from your childhood, that you have been able to heal with building genuine connections, by helping people, by bringing connections together, by supporting them, by nurturing them, by mentoring them?
Well, I'm 70, but I have mentored people most of my life, I must tell you. I mean, the first time I gave a speech, I was maybe 28 or so, and I had a woman come up to me and say, "I'd like to be your agent." And I just laughed. I said, "I'm never going to give another speech." Well, I've given 300 speeches around the world, 2 TEDx speech, one in London at Deutsche Bank's request. They called me and said, "We want you to do a TED Talk." And I said, "Well, I've already given one." And I grew up in a very small town. I'm back in it now. There were 800 people when I left. I think there maybe is 1,800 now. And I didn't fit in. I was the only kid in town that wasn't LDS, Mormon religion. And so I remember, getting bullied. I'm sure that had a lot to do with my feelings about being shy, was maybe stay away from people, they hurt you.
Yeah.
What I've since learned is that people care and will care about you. So that was a big one for me. And I think maybe everybody kind of goes through the series of, they always say when you're younger, you worry about what everybody else thinks about you. And then when you get, my age or 50 even, you realize nobody was thinking about you. They were always worried about themselves.
Yeah.
And, the other one was, I thought I was stupid. I really thought I was stupid. And, when I moved here as a kid, all of the kids around me had dance lessons and voice lessons and were playing piano. And, I didn't do any of those things. So I thought I didn't have any gifts. I thought, how will I make a living? What will I possibly do? And so it took me a while, because I wasn't one of these kids that, at age 3 decided I was going to be an actor or a doctor or something like that.
So, what was that moment for you, or what were those different situations that you had to go through that changed the trajectory of your life? If I may use the word, that those defining moments?
A lot of them had to do with, I guess, my career. So, I went from thinking I wasn't going to have a job who would hire me to being the CEO of a public company. At the time, I made, $350,000 a year. And I thought, wow. So one of the things I did early on, and I would suggest everyone listening do this, is take a piece of paper and at the top write victory log and number it from 1 to 50 and write down all the things that you're proud you have accomplished. And it can be little things, at the time when I was younger, I was thrilled I made it through high school because I thought I was dumb. And I didn't know how to study. I didn't really fit in. And then, I went from making $30,000 a year as a social worker to making career decisions that ended up putting me in places that were wildly successful compared to my background. My father was retired from the military. My mother didn't work outside of the home. I had never met a millionaire. I'm now friends with billionaires, millionaires. Most of my friends indeed did go to Harvard and are very, very well-educated people. And so that has been, each time that I had a new relationship, particularly a new job, I was very curious. I worked very hard to learn as much as I knew. One defining moment is when I went to a very high-level professional job at a Fortune 50 corporation. And I became friends with the legal counsel because I was in charge of employee relations. And he took me under his wing. And, one of the things he taught me was you need to invest in the stock market. Well, I remember my grandmother buying savings bonds in the United States and, tucking them away. And I never knew anybody that had, any kind of investments at all.
Yeah, love the concept of what you spoke about, the victory log, and I call it writing all the things that you're really grateful for. I maintain a Shukrana diary for myself where I definitely write what are the things that I'm really proud of, what are the things I feel are considered as accomplishments, and what are the things that I'm really grateful for. And those small things, it could be building a connection with someone, making sure that you have been able to assist somebody or a help that goes through you, where you've been able to assist somebody in his or her life. And the second thing that you spoke about is the curiosity one, right? And third, of course, when you met the legal counsel who assisted you to take on stocks. And I think these are the small moments in our life, Judy, that change the trajectory of our life. Judy, somehow I believe that your ability to build connection has a direct impact on the kind of influence that you can create in the world and the kind of impact that you can subsequently create. What are your views on that? What, according to you, is a direct connection between building genuine connections and the impact that you can create in the world?
Yeah. So after I got over being concerned I was shy and wasn't smart, and graduate school, another key factor was the dean, who said, Judy, you need to go to Cornell to get a PhD. And I remember coming home and saying to my mother, I wonder what it is I do that makes them think I'm smart. So I had people question assumptions, but after I got through all of those stages, I love to teach. I love to help people have a better life. And so I did 2 books, as you know. The first one, How to Be a Power Connector. It's now 10 years old, and people still write to me every single week. And my notion was to share the powerful lessons that I had learned the very hard way, to help people question their assumptions about themselves, to get over their fear, and to take another step forward. And I figured if I just could change one life, that would have a ripple effect across many generations. Who knows? And it's interesting. And that was part of the reason I also gave speeches. And it's interesting. I had a person reach out to me after I'd given a speech, and they said, that sentence you said changed my life. I didn't even remember saying that sentence. It's interesting what people need. And so, the more honest you are and open with people, it helps them change their lives. And I really do believe that we can have a great deal of power in the universe. I think I've done 300 podcasts, or maybe total 300 podcasts and speeches, and have done, 2 books. I try to post every day on LinkedIn something to do about funding, venture capital, angel investors, family offices, so that I can educate people across that network as well. And I do feel profoundly connected to the universe, whether you call it God or whatever. Oftentimes people will now want to hire me to help them get funded, and it may be an industry that I don't have connections in. And I'm 100% convinced that I say yes, because they will come to me, and they do. So for instance, a fellow hired me to work on his 3-sided platform that works with home services, real estate agents. And I thought, who do I know in real estate? And just a few days later, I was on the phone with a friend of mine in New York, and he said to me, I just started working with this woman in New York. She's considered the coal miner's daughter of real estate. She's a mogul, extremely wealthy, knows this industry. And I said, James, would she be willing to give me some advice on this? And he said, absolutely. So he's in the process of introducing me. And I find the more that you say yes to the universe, that these things happen, that if you put aside your fears and you're open, you know, and part of it is, you know, make sure you spend time to be quiet and to listen.
Yeah. Thank you. And I can listen to you for hours and hours together. That's what I told you earlier as well, Judy. Judy, help me understand. I personally come across a lot of people who have been able to build connections. But I think building connections is one thing. Maintaining and nurturing connections, making sure that you nurture them one conversation at a time, where so that after 10 years, when you look back, you can cherish the foundation of the friendship that you've been able to build with that person and be in awe of the beautiful plant and the tree that these two people came together and planted together 10 years back. How do you nurture that tree of bond, connection, friendship that sustains for over a decade?
So you only have limited time. So you do have limited time, and, you know, you'll never be super close to lots and lots of people. But you can maintain relationships by staying in contact. And people will often say to me, well, Judy, how do you, you know, stay in contact with 25 to 50 people? And I will find a quote or a tidbit of wisdom, and I'll send it out to all of them on a text, I mean, individually. And so, you know, it's not very hard to take a quote, like I just sent out one from Einstein that said, it's not that I'm smarter than everybody else, it's that I stay with the problem a long time. And that resonated with me. And I sent that out to probably 25 people. And so I do make sure, and I do have a very good memory, so that helps as well. But, you know, the most important part is when you're getting to know someone and you have to very quickly get back to them, say thank you on LinkedIn, do something for them, add value. That was one of my secrets of learning how to add value. So people, when they meet strangers, the first thing they look for is some level of kindness, because you don't want somebody to kill you. The second is a level of competency. But I always add a third, and that's generosity, because just because someone can help you doesn't mean they will.
Yeah. Oh, I 200% echo that with you, because on several occasions I've come across people who I feel are sitting at a very influential position, and yet they choose not to assist. And I wonder, why wouldn't they do that? It could be a small act of connecting one with another. It could be a small act of referring one to another. And yet people have their own reservations. And I personally believe that when it comes to connection, Judy, it's a process of generosity and reciprocity. What do you think? Why do people hold it to themselves? And what stops them from being generous to others?
Well, we can start at the top, that is the dark triad, the narcissistic, sociopath, Machiavellian personality characteristics that fit under some mental health issues, certainly. And so, you know, there are people out there with no empathy at all, and they will just use you. You know, I always say give people 3 tries, but the third time they're out. So I watch very carefully people's actions, which always speak louder than words. And then at a level beneath that, there are people that are just very introverted, shy, and very private. And so there's you know, people like that. And that's okay, because all you do is say next. You go find the people for your tribe, people that share your values. You know, you want someone that will help you with your future and watch out for your back.
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah. Let me bring another perspective to that, Judy. At times, could be a possibility that people might have pressed and competing priorities. In that context, how do you ensure to support them and yet keeping your interest alive? It should not happen that um, somebody's eating from your pie. There could be competing priorities as well, right? But at the same time, you would want to genuinely help other people as well. How do you maintain that balance?
So I would recommend that people read Adam Grant's book that talks about givers and takers.
Givers and takers, yes.
And that you realize that, and I've done this, I've made this mistake in the past where I've given to the point I'm burned out and I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want to help anybody else. And so I've got better at understanding that I have to first take care of myself. And that's important. But the reality is we all have lots of extra time in the day. And so, part of it goes back to those assumptions, but you want to take care of yourself. You want to make sure that the people that you have in your network fit with your values and they can help you. A lot of people have networks that they couldn't help them if they needed. And it's nice to have friends. Madeleine Albright, I once heard her say on stage, women don't network, they make friends. And so you need to make sure that you have built some strategic relationships. And what happens is then you go up and up and up. For instance, one of my neighbors here in this little town drives a milk truck. And one of my friends in New York is a VC fellow who had an exit of 49x with the Shave Club exit. Very, very wealthy. Now, if I ask those two, my two, famous questions, and tell them what I'm doing and ask, what other ideas do you have for me? And second, who else do you know I should talk to? It's going to be a very different experience with those two people. And this is why it's important that you have people that have a level of gravitas. Not only can they help you, but they can make things happen for you.
Beautiful, beautiful questions. I think, what are the ideas do you have for me and who do you think I should connect with? I remember my conversation with a lady called Marilyn Hamilton. Marilyn is based out of UK, and she does something in the space of integral cities. And I was having this conversation with Marilyn. Marilyn gave me a similar question. She said, whose voice we should consider that's not in this room? So as I heard these two questions, it reminded me of Marilyn's question. Since you spoke about that we need to take care of the strategic relationships that can actually help us grow, you also spoke about building genuine connections. In the world where we are living in, where we can reach out to anyone, and if not everyone, we would have X percentage of people responding to our messages on LinkedIn, on so many social media channels. In this world, how do you ensure that we continue to expand our network, and yet we also maintain the quality of connections, the deep connections we have been able to build with people? How do you maintain the balance?
What I find is it becomes pretty clear within just a couple of months, and for me, sometimes instantly, on a relationship, that this is an important person that I'll have involved in my life. I do pay attention to my intuition of, does this person, fit in my life? And like I mentioned before, if I get to the point that I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know it's time to take a break. And go back to, there's a famous question that is, if you and I were having this conversation 5 years from today, what would need to happen for you to be happy and successful? Specifically, what 5 problems do you need to deal with? What 5 strengths do you need to increase? And what 5 opportunities do you need to go after now? And I'll send you a note, a little one pager that you can share with your audience for the show notes that has that in there. And I have found that that is really helpful in centering myself, because, the reality is not much can kill you. I mean, I remember the first company I had was a franchise restaurant, dumb me, and I thought I was going broke, and I went to a bankruptcy attorney. I was so scared I was shaking in my boots. And he said to me, "They can break you, but they can't eat you." And that put, strength up my spine. I turned it around and sold it. And, oftentimes we're so worried about the tiger behind us or the grizzly bear. And the reality is they're not there. It's in our head.
I'm still with the question 5 years from now, if we are sitting together, having a conversation, looking back, now, what are those challenges that I've overcome? What are those 5 things that I've accomplished? What are the 5 opportunities that I've been able to tap that I'm really happy about? I have very clear answers, Judy. I'll be very happy to share them during our next conversation. Judy, help me understand. Why do you think it's becoming more and more important for today's leaders working in the corporate arena to genuinely invest in building connections beyond their organizations?
Yeah, so almost all CEOs know this. I once heard Jack Welch in his speech say, "Forget an MBA, learn how to network." And you find out that the higher levels have extensive networks that are broad, deep, and wide. And that's really only one way you can get ahead in your career, because, one day you're an engineer, you've been doing it for 25 years and the company lays you off, and then you go, "Oh, geez, what to do?" Well, if you had built those relationships, you would have them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Judy. Judy, any last message that you would like to give to our audience? And primarily our audience are people who are from C-suite level in different organizations. They are leading different teams. Any last piece of advice that you might have to offer to them?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I love that Oprah said is, learn to feel the feather on your cheek. If you don't feel the feather on your cheek, you get the brick in the head. And if you don't get the brick in the head, the wall falls in. And so I think it's incredibly important to not push aside problems or issues with your team or with others, that you address them quickly. And that is also a difficult one, to deal with, but it's absolutely critical. So people like Manoj Kwali, I think is how you say his last name. He was head of SoftBank India for 40 years. His big and he's taken many companies to billionaire unicorn status. His big emphasis, it's the culture. It is the culture, it is the employees. And so I think people that pay attention to that are ahead. Every once in a while, you'll see people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and they're probably on the spectrum. They have the dark triad characteristics, and they lead by fear and intimidation and nastiness. And many times they accomplish a lot, but the damage, to the employees and the organization is huge.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Judy. I can go on and on and on. So this was primarily, we try to look at this book, How to Be a Power Connector, the 50 plus 50 plus 50 rule for turning your business network into profits. And I would love to have you again on this show, Judy, where we'll talk about crack the funding code, how the investors think and what they need to hear to fund your startups, right? Would love to have this another conversation with you. Thank you so much.
What a treat for me to be on with you. And by the way, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. You can email me, Judy@judyrobinett.com. Thank you so much.